We're already all being serious, and then
Yep.
Oh wait, are we live?
Well, I think we're live. So
are we live?
Yep.
I should quit picking my nose. Then.
How exciting!
Okay, I'm going to introduce the show then. So welcome to Lasers, Dragons, and Keyboards. I'm Liberty Spidell.
I'm Josh Hart.
And I apologize in advance.
If anybody has seen the pre-show, which we don't record live or record at all, everybody would know why we're saying that.
I'm a little disappointed that wasn't recorded. There was some good stuff in there.
If this show goes as well as the pre-show, they're our best/worst show ever.
That's what I aim for. So
great.
Setting the bar lower every day.
So today on the show we have with us Mollie Reeder. And Mollie, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited. I'm going to act like I just got here, even though I didn't. I'm Mollie. I'm an author and a filmmaker. Today I'm mostly going to be talking about The Electrical Menagerie, which is my debut novel, which just released in June. And I live in Texas. It's really, really hot here right now. So whenever I'm asked to introduce myself on something like this, I feel like I'm filling out a dating profile. I'm like, no, I like dogs.
You're my people. I love my dogs.
This is going to be a good show after all.
Okay. Well, it's great to have you on the show, Mollie.
Yes, welcome, Mollie.
Thank you.
Hello.
And I think Aaron has the first question.
Because Aaron asked for the first question.
He was excited about it too.
I'm going to do this a little bit differently than normal. Normally, it's a random, it's a three-part fast-fire question. However, I have to ask, because the first question starts off with, what is your name? Now, it's already Mollie Reeder. Now, is that a pen name? And if it is a pen name, please lie and tell me it's not.
You cut out for just a second on that last part. What did you say?
Oh, I'm sorry. I said, is Mollie Reeder a pen name? And if it is a pen name, please lie and tell me it isn't.
It is not a pen name.
That is the most awesome name
and
ever for
people,
an author/reader.
People get really excited now. It is Reeder. It is not Reader. So that serendipity just like curved. The bullet curved there at the last second. That is my real name. Yeah. And I have a friend who said, he came to me one day and said, your nickname should be The Book. And I was like, The Book? Why? Which I was like, that's kind of a cool name. Like if I was like a hard-boiled detective, I'm like, I would totally be like, you don't want to mess with the book. The book's going to read your right. But I was like, why The Book? And he was like, because then you'd be Mollie the Book Reeder. And I was like, no. No.
That's awesome.
For the rest of this question, which is kind of spoiled a little bit now, what is your quest and what is your favorite color?
I'd say my quest. I feel like I could give a funny answer to this. I'm not. I'm going to give a deep and meaningful answer to this. I feel like my quest is to tell stories that empower people that feel disempowered. My favorite color is orange. I have a lot of favorite colors, but I guess orange.
All right.
That's my
today it's color. Orange.
Oh, today.
Yeah.
Okay, well, why don't you tell us a little bit about The Electrical Menagerie?
Yeah. So The Electrical Menagerie is like steampunk adventure fantasy. It's set in a world of floating islands where everything is powered by stardust and electricity instead of steam.
Okay.
So
oh, cool.
Steampunk's kind of my reference point that I use to pitch it to people, but there's actually not anything powered by steam. So it is about two kind of mismatched producers who have a one-of-a-kind robotic roadshow but they are bankrupt. And to save their show, they kind of stake every last thing they have, like their train. They travel by train, and they stake every last thing they have to enter a royal talent competition where they're going to compete against all the best performers in the empire for the privilege of performing for the future queen at her palace on her birthday. They get into that contest, and they very quickly find that they're kind of not only in over their heads as producing performers, but they're also possibly caught up in conspiracy and the secrets that all the other performers are keeping, and possibly even murder. So it's a fun, it's kind of a buddy story. There's flying trains and robots.
I was just going to say, wait a minute, floating islands and a train, does this mean flying trains?
It is, absolutely, yes, flying trains.
I wanted to read this book based on just the title alone, and now I really want to read this.
Awesome,
exactly.
Yeah. That title's kind of a mouthful. I loved it when I picked it, and that is the name of their show, is The Electrical Menagerie. But I did kind of like, every time I go to like tell people what it is, like in person, they're like, "What's the name of your book?" I'm like, "It's The Electrical Menagerie." And then I'm like, "I can write that down for you." The other day, my dad, he said,
I couldn't spell it.
yeah. The other day, my dad was like, he said, I'm gonna read The Glass Menagerie. And I was like, "That's good for you." I was like, I didn't actually write The Glass Menagerie. The Electrical Menagerie. But
That's awesome.
All right, now I gotta know. I gotta know now if there is a book called The Glass Menagerie.
yeah,
There is.
I believe there is. Yeah.
I think that sounds familiar.
Yeah, I think it's by Tennessee Williams.
There is. Oh my goodness, a Google search comes up with something.
That's
That's
scary.
yeah.
So
It's a memory, it's a memory play by Tennessee Williams. You are right.
I was thinking that it was a play. Yeah.
So what made you write the Glass Menagerie? I mean, the Electrical Menagerie.
Apparently,
you know, I was thinking about this question last night, and I always like stumble over this question. I think that's because I think that I should have a really meaningful answer. Like I've been wanting to write this book since I was 5 years old, and it's like, but like all my stories, I do end up discovering along the way, like there is a reason that the story is important to me, but I don't usually know that when I set out. And so I usually don't have this like, oh, it's just been like burning in me and I had to tell the story. For me, it's usually characters. I get excited about characters, and that's really where all my stories start, is that I have a character that I just really want to write about.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case,
I want to read this even more now.
Yes, I came on this show just to sell 3 books to you guys, so it's going great so far.
Mission successful.
I really wanted to write about the relationship in this book. I wanted to do a story about 2 friends who had a wide age gap. One of them is in his 40s and the other one is in his 20s. And I wanted to kind of write this, buddy dynamic where sometimes it's a father-son dynamic, and then sometimes it's a reversed father-son dynamic. So sometimes the older guy is the father and sometimes the younger guy is the father, and they're kind of learning from each other, and they have they have elements that make each other complete or that conflict with each other. And so for me, I wanted to write about that friendship.
Nice.
Cool.
In all seriousness, I do really love and prefer character-driven fiction over
Yes,
plot-driven.
me too.
So I really want to read this now. So if I disappear for a while, I'm going to be bopping over to Amazon and hitting the one-click button, and I'll just hear you'll know what I'll be doing anyway. Josh will be like, "No, wait, at least
Don't do it. Don't do it. Not yet.
At least ask your next question.
What?
At least ask your next question before you go over to
This is
Amazon.
my turn, isn't it? What was the best part of writing this book for you as the author?
Oh, that's a good question. Finishing it. Probably.
Good answer.
Yeah.
All of us can relate to that.
Yeah.
All the authors in the audience right now are dying laughing, and the readers
They're like,
are
yeah, that's it.
Yep.
It's
that's the point.
it's so cruel because like you're like the whole time you're writing, you're like, oh, I can't wait until I get to the end and it's done. And then as soon as it's done, you're like really sad. Like, why is it done?
You know why you're sad? Because the next stage is editing, which is torture.
Yeah. For real.
I think it's actually banned by some countries.
Probably just getting to sort of do the world building, honestly, and getting to go into this world and just live there. I mean, you know, it's like when you're writing a book, you have to just kind of go and inhabit that setting. And I would totally live there. Like I love this setting. So I think that was one of my favorite parts. Was I love history, and but I write spec because I like to have the freedom of just like pulling the parts in that I like and not having to sit and do a lot of research. So I really enjoy being able to. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, you know what? I don't like the facts. I just change them. So I really enjoyed being able to pull in a lot of different things. You look at the stuff that's in this book, it's got circuses and magicians and, you know, late 1800s technology and just the aesthetic of it. It's a lot of things that are just interesting to me. I just kind of threw together everything that I like. And so I can do that because I'm the author. So
yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I just pulled up the listing on Amazon, and your cover is really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So do you have a favorite character? And if so, who and why?
Right now.
This is a controversial question.
They all will get mad at you if you tell
Yeah,
them.
I'm like, and this dynamic, like there's two of them. It's dual POV, which is really fun because it really lets me really, you know, get to see each of the characters through the opposite perspective, and I got to play with that a lot, which was really, really fun because especially at the outset of the story, they're not really friends yet. They're business partners and like they're traveling together on this tour, but they don't really understand each other, and so it's really fun just to see how they perceive each other and get that kind of behind the scenes of what they're thinking. I honestly, and like not just being diplomatic, I don't think that I can pick between them because I think, like I said in the last question, I think like even from the outset, it was really about the two characters together. And so I think what I really like is them together and not one of them individually. Carthage is the older guy, and he is an illusionist and an engineer. He's really eccentric. He had this kind of tragic backstory and this shut-in childhood, and so he's older, but he's a lot like a child. He's got this really he's kind of based a little bit on like J.M. Barrie, and so he's got this very like childlike perspective that other people don't understand. And I've had a lot of like creatives that have read the book as it's come out and have come to me and said, oh my goodness, I so identified with him because it's just kind of that story of what it's like to be a creative and to sort of be in your own world, and people don't always get you. And Huxley is the younger guy, and he is he's foreign. He's come over from kind of like another colony that's sort of a little bit like 1800s America, and he came from kind of a rich family. They have an orange orchard, but he didn't want to do that, and so he's kind of set off to like become his own thing, but he doesn't really know what his own thing is, and he's very sneaky and opportunistic and kind of a little bit of a con man. He was a card counting dealer before he met Carthage, and so they kind of have very different ideals and worldviews because Huxley's a little bit cynical and thinks that he's really world wise, but you know, is like kind of doesn't really know what's going on.
Cool.
That is, yeah. You know, every answer you give, it's like, okay, yep, I'm gonna get.
Now, are you going to be at off the question? Are you going to be at Realmmakers this year?
I am, and the book will be at Realmmakers.
That was my next question.
Yes, I'll have paperbacks.
I will probably get the Kindle version in the meantime, but I definitely want to get a book and have it signed at this point.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm super excited. I will have a table in the vendor hall, so for anybody listening that's going to be there, come find me.
I got to rob a bank because there's at least 10 books that I want to get this year too.
I'm the same way. I'm like, oh no, I got to like, I did not.
Jason Joyner's book just came out, and I got to get that one too.
Yep.
Maybe I'll have to check the couch. That's always my answers for where to get money is check the couch.
Right. Yes.
So
And the cup holder
$100 in there, right? I mean,
yeah, cup holder in the car. Yep, and drawers, desk drawers. So what's something
I have bills and sadness in my desk drawers?
What's something that the readers of the Electrical Menagerie would be about either?
So I don't know if they would be surprised because it's not a secret, but I do still find that sometimes people don't know this. So I produced a movie a couple years ago, and we are sort of in the phase of post-production where we're trying to sell it. We're trying to get it distributed. So you can't currently see it anywhere. It has been at a couple film festivals, but we're trying to get it to where you can actually see it everywhere. So that's always, people always like, oh, where can I see it? I'm like, well, you can't. We're in the not exciting part of like looking at contracts and legal and all that stuff. But so that is really what I've been working in, like media production for, I think I started doing that full time about 6 years ago. And so I did a lot of corporate, like producing videos for corporate companies and that kind of thing. And then got into, like, came and joined the production staff for this movie. It's a middle grade musical. It's kind of in the style of like a Disney Channel movie.
Back up a minute. Are you responsible for those crappy HR videos?
Yes, I have shot some of those, but I just want to say in my defense, like the company always writes the script and I just had to come in and yeah.
Okay, so it's not entirely your fault. I don't have to strangle you anymore then.
I did accidentally get into like a minor argument with a client one time at a fast food restaurant chain that will remain unnamed, but I was like, I just feel like this dialogue that you gave this child is really unrealistic. And later the guy that I was working with, he was like, man, you really told her. I was like, I was not trying to tell her. I just, my like writer came out and I was like, can we change this? This is like, I just don't feel this. Like, sorry. I was like, should I apologize? He was like, no.
And for those of you listening who have never seen a corporate video like we're discussing,
you're lucky.
Don't whatever you do, don't Google it. They're horrible. The dialogue is always stilted and boring, and you're kind of like they're worse than the infomercial. You know the infomercials where you get the before and the person can't use like a frying pan to save their life. The corporate training videos are worse than that.
Oh. So that's a surprising thing about me. That's actually not the fact that I was going to hone in on, but that is another surprising fact about me is that I have actually produced those horrible corporate training videos. But yeah, so that's kind of where I've been working for, the last while. That's all through high school. I was like, I want to work in film, and it was always difficult for me because I was always really interested in writing books as well, and it always kind of felt like an either or thing. So I feel really blessed the last couple of years that I've been able to do both, not really at the same time, but have been able to do both. So a lot of people ask, they're like, why the themes and why the content of this book? And I'm like, well, show business is like my thing. I love show business and have been there. And one time I made the mistake of saying, I was like, this book is based off of a lot of real experiences I've had. And then I started thinking about what's in the book. I was like, okay, wait, stop. Gotta, hold on. To clarify.
Wait, flying trains based on real experiences? What's this girl on?
You guys need to dream bigger.
Nice.
And that kind of leads right into, did you feel this book had to be written in this particular setting? If so, why? How would a setting change or change the book? And I can just imagine, all right, we're going to make the islands not flying anymore, and now we have a submarine train.
Which would have probably been a pretty cool book. I mean, now that you mention it. I wanted flying trains. It had to be. I think like a more sincere answer. I think yes, absolutely, because one of the things that I love about steampunk is, to me, and I feel like I'm about to ignite a huge argument about genre when I make a definitive statement like this, but I feel like one of the things that I really like that tends to be typical, not universal of steampunk, but tends to be typical, is that there's a sense of like futuristic optimism. And you see a lot of like protagonists in steampunk that are like inventors or they're scientists, and sort of curiosity is treated like a virtue a lot of times in that genre. And I think a lot of it has to do with when you look at a setting that's kind of pseudo turn of the century, that's kind of what culture was doing at the time. We had so many people, whether they were creatives or they were inventors or they were scientists that were contemporaries. It was an amazing, that was just an amazing period of time. And you really had people looking forward. You had authors like Jules Verne, who's kind of, it wouldn't be called steampunk for decades, but you had Jules Verne writing stories that were kind of what we know now as steampunk and science fiction. People were starting to Tesla's trying to invent ray guns. I mean, people were starting to have that modern mindset, but we were still stuck in, like, we didn't have the technology that we have now. It's still primitive in a lot of ways. So I think that's a great period, and setting the book there, because so much of the book is about human invention and is about imagination and curiosity. Having it kind of in that pastiche of that time period is really, I think, where it needed to be set. Kind of before people get jaded, I think, of technology, as the technology was still very like whimsical. The other thing about it that I didn't anticipate, but that just kind of came out, is that the whole culture is based, it's set in the Celestial Isles, and that's the name of the series. And the whole culture, as I kind of did the world building and wrote the book, emerged to be really based around the stars. And it's a kind of flat Earth cosmology. I won't get into all of it here because I've done a lot of world building about how the science of the world works, but the stars are not fixed. They actually can move around. Sometimes they fall. And so that kind of came out, and I realized as I was writing that because it's a story about show business and that kind of thing, that there's this amazing metaphor, because when we have a human being who's a celebrity, or they're really smart, or they're really famous, we actually call them stars. And so I won't spoil how that's used in the book, but some really, really neat things came out. And I think it absolutely had to be set in this culture where the idea of the stars is so important.
Cool.
Very neat.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds really interesting. So, Mollie, what's your favorite scene in the book? And try to describe it without too many spoilers.
Well, you have to tell authors not to spoil their own book. Like, don't get too excited.
Well, see, I would get so excited with some of my scenes, because most of my favorite scenes are in the climax, that it would totally spoil the book.
So did such a oops.
Oh no. You know, when such and such dies.
Oh crap.
When it all turns out to be a dream. Absolutely no. That's why there were flying trains. I think so. I don't like writing the middle, but I really like the midpoint of any story. That's like I like always looking forward to getting to the midpoint, because something always really cool happens. And in this one, it's a ball. They get invited to this really fancy party, and they get to meet kind of a lot of, other like high society people. And I was just really excited about that scene, because I got to write about a fancy ball. Like, it was just like a really great scene. But where it fell in the story, it ended up kind of being right about the time that the two characters are sort of starting to think that they could become friends. Everybody's story is really just like a love story in disguise. And so it was really, really fun to think about, as they start to actually become friends and think like, oh, we could actually hang out with each other. What does that look like? And how do they find a chemistry? And so that was really great. And so many things happen to that ball. Somebody throws up, somebody gets kissed. It's a wild time.
Somebody's throwing up.
I like to drop spoilers, but just minor spoilers like that.
I was going to say, everything you say makes me more excited about this book until we got the throwing up part.
I had to actually ask a beta reader on one of my last books. I'm like, how many times in a book can my main character actually throw up and not have it be overdone?
One.
said 2, but don't have them spaced too closely together.
I'm glad to know that there's like a quota on that. It's like 2.
You know, I wanted to talk. I have something to show up in my book I'm writing now. So.
Yeah. I have to admit, the latest installment in your web serial, Aaron, made me raise my eyebrows a little bit. Anyways.
Uh-oh.
Nice.
I thought he was going to say made me throw up. I was like,
Wasn't that bad?
All right. So I'm going to throw a curveball at you, Molly.
uh-oh.
Miss All Prepared.
Yeah, because he knows that I looked at the list last night.
Oh. Car passing.
Well, hurry up and take the change.
Yes. That's a running inside joke on the show for our listeners. So when you were going to study about the world building and figure that out, what were your sources? Because you said it's kind of a flat Earth thing and all that. So
he's like, I really want to know, Molly, how do you feel about just for the record, the Earth is round.
No.
Clear the air on
that
that.
established.
Where did you go to be inspired?
So
Steam stuff and your
yeah.
Sounds like
That's
she
a great
got drunk
question.
and browsed Facebook.
Oh no, he's on to me. So I'm gonna this confession. This can't go beyond this show. No, I read a lot about history and science, just for fun. That's just something that I've always done. When I'm actually writing, and this is probably going to be my answer to one of the questions in the writing segment of the show. But when I sit down to write, I'm not one of those people that's let me do all my research first, and I'll compile a big document and learn all this stuff. I start with things that are interesting to me that I have learned or heard over time. And that's usually why I haven't enough content to make a book, because for several years I've been storing things that I think are interesting. So when I'm writing, I usually don't do research until I hit an actual snag in a scene, and I'm like, wait, how would this work? Or I can't go
about how I do it too.
Okay, I'm glad I'm not the only one, because I only ever talk to writers. They're like, I have my entire, they pull out a thing and they're like, this is my research. I'm like, I don't do any research. I'm just make it up till I can't make it up. And then I do a quick Google check.
Yeah, I have to say that I've got one series idea right now that is going to require some setting research because it's historical. But
yeah.
It's I kind of need to know how fast cars can go in the 1940s, and yeah,
you kind of run into those logistical issues that won't let you go any further. So
yeah,
Josh, I don't think I have a really direct answer to your question, because I just kind of looked things up when I had a question, but a lot of it I just made it up. It's not a real scientific model. I just
That's okay. You're doing it right.
Either that or we're all doing it wrong.
Okay, who has the D6? I think that's your question.
Take a quick break here and hit pause and explain to Molly what that little yellow live button means.
Wait, people can hear this?
Yes.
Yes.
I have a D6.
Okay. Aaron's question.
What's our number?
We're doing 9-3.
9-3. What character from all of SpecFic would you most like to go on a quest with?
Indiana Jones. And if you tell me that he's not from SpecFic, I will fight you.
Oh, I would definitely agree that he's SpecFic.
Yeah, I wanted that question because I was really excited about that answer. 100%.
I mean, people's faces really don't melt off.
Really? Well, considering what was it, The Last Crusade, Harrison Ford and Sean Connery were only separate. They're only 15 years apart from one another, or something like that, or 12 years, something like that. And one's the dad, and one's the
Right.
Yeah, and
I
if
heard
you
that
really,
too.
Yeah,
if
I
you
heard. I
really
just recently
need
heard
further
that.
conviction that Indiana Jones is spec fic, just go watch Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Yes.
They went.
No,
Totally.
off the window there.
They jumped the shark on that one.
Rumor confirmed.
Yep.
I think you mean what? We don't know what you're talking about, right?
Yes, exactly.
Oh dear. Scroll.
It's your question.
I know. I'm scrolling.
Go faster.
So, Molly, who are some of the authors that you personally would recommend? Who are some of your favorites that you just go back to all the time?
So,
Safe answer is always us.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like I don't reread books a whole lot. So ones I go back to.
Maybe not go back to the books themselves, but the authors. Like,
yeah. I'll tell you a couple. So, because we're talking about steampunk, one of my favorite books that I've read in the last couple of years was Storming by K.M. Weiland.
Oh, that one's really good.
I love Katie.
Yeah, that, like, you can tell her for me. I loved that book. Although I think she's heard me gush about it on Twitter, so she probably knows, but I loved that book. And that really
good
hit,
book.
it's so good. And it really hit so many of the things that I personally like just in a book. I loved that it had this flaw. He's really likable, but he's really flawed. And like, I just love flawed
Ah, yes, the Han Solo character.
protagonist. Good guy, but
Oh no, we're losing you.
like,
Oh no.
Oh no, we lost her.
All right.
Ah. Panic. What do we do now?
by which is
Okay, Molly.
what?
We lost
Molly,
her for a second.
we
So
want-
We're experiencing technical difficulties.
I'm here. You dropped out for just a second.
yeah, you're the one dropping out for us.
Oh. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Good.
Yes.
Okay, let's start over with your rant about storming.
I'm back.
Thank you.
The Rant of Praise. Yeah, no, I loved Storming. That's a great book, and that's Diesel Punk. So it's set. I don't know what. I don't want to misquote which year it's set.
It's set like in the early 1920s, like 1920, 21, before. After World War One,
Yes.
it's really early diesel punk because technically diesel technology wasn't developed until the 30s, but because it's not based off of steam, it's not steampunk. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yep.
I'm married to a diesel technician. I know all this diesel crap.
That's the technical answer.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, it is such a good book, and
Yeah.
I don't know if she's planning to make a sequel to that, but it would be awesome if she did. I know she's working on sequels. She's starting to work on writing a series, but
Is that Wayfarer?
yeah. Well, actually, she's drafting the second book after Dreamlander.
Actually, the diesel engine was patented in 1886
Really?
Wow.
by Rudolf Diesel.
Okay, I thought it was 30s, but okay.
Well,
I like how she knew so much about
the 30s,
history
but yeah.
of diesel technology, and yet you still had to just like
Yeah.
take her down like that.
Shots fired.
I was going off of what my husband said, so apparently my husband was wrong.
Well, there's often a big gap between the initial patent or something
Right.
and when it actually becomes
yeah.
commonly used and available.
Yeah. So, so she's working on a sequel to Dreamlander, and Wayfarer. I've beta read that for her, and it is definitely set up to be a series as opposed to Dreamlander, which was supposed to be a standalone, and now she's turning it into a trilogy. So
Interesting. Yeah, I'm really excited about Wayfarer too, just from the little that she's like dropped on social media.
it's really good. I did get to beta read it, so it is really good. So she, I don't know if you're in her private group or not, but she dropped some cover concepts yesterday.
What?
Yeah.
You need to sneak. I don't think I am. You need to sneak me into that group.
I can tell you how to get into the group after the show because I'm one of her moderators. So
We need to take a quick break right now for some Facebook stalking. We'll be back in a minute.
What?
So, okay. Now we're losing
Josh.
Josh. We're losing you.
Uh-oh.
Technology.
Okay.
Josh is malfunctioning.
Yeah, Josh is malfunctioning. That's
He
what
does
happens
that.
when he forgets to charge his batteries.
I'm gonna go oil him again.
I think he's trying to ask what's up next for you.
I'm back.
Okay,
Hey,
good.
he's back. Woo!
Internet went out for a minute.
Yeah,
So,
apparently.
what's up next for you, Molly? And when can your avid fans expect to see it?
Did you say rabid fans?
You said avid. Rabbit
yes,
is good
the
too.
rabid fans.
Yeah. So this is it's a series. Although this first book stands alone for anybody who's like, oh no, I don't want to get involved in another series. The first book is a complete standalone adventure, but there will be more. I am writing short fiction that is set in this universe with these characters all the time. I did a few flash fictions that were released leading up to the launch that are out there that you can find. I'll probably compile them in one place soon, but and then I have a novelette that ties in. That's free to my newsletter subscribers. So right now I'm kind of rolling out little micro content like that. So if you're interested in the series and the world, or you've read the book and you want more, there's more coming. And then what I'm working on is the next novel in the series. I'm working on the sequel. So
Cool.
Not sure when that's going to be out yet, but.
All right.
So we can transition to the writing section of the show. Molly, are you a plotter or a pantser?
So I'm a pretty diehard plotter.
Sweet.
Like we talked about at the beginning of the show, that I start with characters, and so when I was kind of a novice writer, I would always have characters, but I didn't know how to tell a story. So I would start a story because I would be like, I want to write scenes with these characters, and I would write a couple scenes, but I didn't know how to actually put the scenes together into a plot, which I feel like maybe if you're a more like plot centric person, you're probably like, that, you idiot. How do you know how to, like, you've got to, like, it didn't make sense to me. So I think as far back as high school, I think I was in high school and I read Save the Cat, which you guys are probably familiar with, but it's technically a screenwriting book. And at the time I was really focusing on screenwriting. And I read that book, and it really, I'm like, people who know me are like, stop talking about Save the Cat, because it really changed my writing life. And so I'm a huge evangelist for Save the Cat. I realize it's not what works for everybody, but it just did such a wonder for me. It is very, he was very, I would say, like, religious about, like, he's like, certain things have to happen on certain pages, and movies are a little bit more like that because they're a lot tighter and more technical than a book can be. But I needed those training wheels when I started writing. I needed to be like, because I didn't know how to even put together, something with structure. So having that kind of following the beat sheet from point to point was really what taught me to write. At this point, I don't always like fill out a beat sheet when I start something. I go to that if I get stuck, because a lot of times if I get in the middle and I'm like, ooh, like something doesn't feel right, what's not here, and I might look at it and go like, oh, like my character didn't make a proactive choice when he entered Act 2. So having that vocabulary really helped me, just even identifying problems when I beta read and that sort of thing. I really am a big fan of story paradigm, but I've gotten more into kind of discovery writing like recently, just because I've gotten more comfortable. A lot of the structure for me is more intuitive, so I've gotten to where I wrote a few TV scripts last year where I discovery wrote them beginning to end. Like I started with a log line and I just wrote them front to back to see what would happen, and they turned out pretty, like, okay. I mean, they were first drafts, but I was like, hey, I can do that. So I'm kind of dabbling in that a little bit more, but overall I don't think I'll ever like pants a whole novel, because I'm like getting halfway through and then throwing it all out. I like Aaron.
Somebody was mentioning this general topic of potting versus pantsing in a Facebook group the other day, and it's kind of interesting to me after you've interviewed a whole bunch of different authors, you have potters and you have pantsers, but the more often that either type has been doing this, they become more. They tend to become more of a hybrid.
Right. That's interesting. That's a good observation.
I used to be a whole potter, and now I kind of, and everything tends to come to center.
I think the surprising thing, because I do write, like, now I don't usually do like beat sheets, but I will do like maybe a synopsis, and sometimes it's a fairly detailed synopsis before I start. I always think that it's really detailed, but when I get into it, I'm always like, crazy stuff happens, and I had no idea that was going to happen. So as like much as I love structure, and I'm a very concrete thinker, so I like going from point A to point B, like there is still inherently, I think, a lot of discovery in writing. So I love writing excuses. It's the best writing podcast, second only to this one.
I see what you did there.
Nice stuff up there.
Yeah, I love writing excuses, and they did an episode on this, I think, recently, and I loved what they said. Somebody on there said basically, like, you are going to do the work, right? You can't cheat. Like, it's hard work. You're going to do the work. You have to decide if you prefer to do it at the beginning or the end. And I have found that some writers are genuinely like, I hate doing it at the beginning. I would rather rewrite my novel a dozen times than rewrite my outline a dozen times, because that to them is just not fun. For me, I do not want to have to rewrite my novel a dozen times. I want to write a fairly clean first draft because I just hate editing. So I would rather, and I just did this with the sequel to The Electrical Menagerie. I had an outline for a couple months, and when I sat down to write it, I realized it was broken. I mean, I got into the first chapter and I went, this is like, I don't know what some of these characters are doing, and it's not there. And I threw out the antagonists. I said, I'm going to cut them and replace them with somebody else. Threw out a couple subplots that weren't working and tied everything together. So I'm so glad I did that in an outline and not after I had written like 80,000 words, because that would make me cry.
Have you read any of Katie Wayland's or Weiland's nonfiction on structure and outlining and character arcs?
So I haven't read any of her full-length books, but I love her online resources, and I actually send people there a lot because she's really teaching for novelists a lot of what I learned from Save the Cat. Right. Which is kind of phrased more for screenwriters. But yeah, I love her. I love her website. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I've been, singing her praises for 10 years. She's been a friend of mine for that long. So.
Insert a quick question. Do you have a pet cat, and is its name a variation of the word save?
Now that you mention it, my life is incomplete.
Every writer needs a cat. It's like a rule.
I have 3, and they're jerks.
Oh.
You must have got unlucky or something. Only one of our cats is a jerk.
I don't have any pets.
They have varying degrees
of
jerkiness.
I don't have any pets right now. I love pets, and I used to have a lot of pets, but I don't have any right now.
Okay.
I had a rat, actually.
Ugh. My wife had a rat. Fortunately, before I knew her, we would probably not be married right now.
Heel killer.
You have a Captain Kirk cutout. That's your pet, right?
That's what keeps me company.
You can't keep people, even cardboard people, as pets. That's not healthy.
Okay, there's
that a rule?
Idea. There's your next story idea. Your Kirk cutout actually holds William Shatner. Trapped in. There you go.
Trapped inside. I don't know if that's really funny or really horrifying.
A little bit of both.
Depends on if it actually talks like Shatner or not.
Oh.
If your cardboard cutout talks, you might want to seek professional help. And or an exorcist. Probably Anne. Are we on question number 2?
Yes, I believe we are.
We got a little sidetracked there. It was fun. So what exactly does your writing process look like?
My process. What's my process? That's a good question. Wow, what is my process? A lot of prayer, honestly. Every day I'm like, oh, I gotta write this book. Well, so I mean, we kind of talked about that a little bit. I mean, I write a synopsis is usually where I start, that I kind of use as an outline, and then I write. This is not going to be earth shaking, but I write chronologically. I start at the beginning and go to the end, and I like I said, I do like to have a pretty clean first draft. So I don't sit there and slave over line editing for months, but I do tend to write fairly. Like I hate to say slow because I realize it's such a wide, like what's slow for one person is not slow for another, but I tend to write somewhat slowly and thoughtfully. I can't just like vomit draft the way some people do, because as I'm writing, if I feel like it's going to have to change, I can't just leave it. I have to like get it right before I move on. So, and stuff still changes, but so.
Cool. Okay, we're being told to skip through. Okay.
So,
how long does it take you to knock out a draft then?
Okay.
Oh wait, we changed colors.
Sure. The first question. All right, so all right.
I did kind of think we were like, are we going to swap colors? I was like, that sounds like it's going to be confusing.
What could possibly go wrong?
What could go wrong?
Yes. Go ahead, Liberty. Or go ahead, Molly, answer the question. I'll ask them.
What was the question?
I don't know.
How long does it take you to knock out a draft?
Oh, I think
All 4 rounds?
Yeah. I think that's what it feels like. Gosh, I think it varies. But I think a lot of, like, for a book, I think about 3 months.
That sounds pretty reasonable. How long are your books?
It's depended. Yeah, I've written a couple that were closer to 100,000, and then I wrote a YA that was a little shorter. And then the Electrical Menagerie, I actually don't know how long it is. That's a great question. I think it's 75. I want to say it's like 70 to 75.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, and that one took me, I think, about 3 months.
That's not too bad.
Not bad at all.
Thank you.
So, when you're writing, what software do you prefer?
Scrivener.
Woohoo!
No real plot twist there, I guess. But actually, I'm a recent convert to Scrivener. I wrote the first novel I ever wrote, which is unpublished, but I wrote that one just in like open office, and I was like, wow, this is hard, because that was I was just like, I've got just documents and things everywhere, and I didn't really understand. Like, people had talked about Scrivener, I was like, oh, why do I need Scrivener? Like, I have a word processor.
Mm-hmm.
But people kept like converting, and they'd be like, it's the best thing ever. And it's one of those things where like I just didn't get it till I downloaded the trial and figured it out, and then I was like, oh, I need this. And I mean, like, with this project now, like, I have everything in that. I have one Scrivener project for the series, so I have research in a folder. I have like, oh no, what did I call the days of the week? Like internal, like continuity things, and what month was it that they went to wherever? And so I have all that just in there. And even if I'm working on a short story or a flash fiction or something, it's just right there. So Scrivener is, I couldn't. Yeah. It's great.
It's especially nice if you end up writing out of order or in multiple point of view, so you can move those scenes and those chapters around pretty easily. I mean, it's so hard in Word because you're cutting and pasting and all that. So
just being able to see.
Control X, by the way, that'll speed that up a lot.
Yeah. But I still prefer
Scrivener. You can't see it.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, for me, like, just having the little like what I call the window pane. The binder. Thank you. I was like, it's got a name. I don't know. The binder, and just being able to see, like, I label my, like you were talking about POVs. I label my alternating POVs by color.
Right.
So Yeah, and I just look at them and I'm like, oh, I see. And I'm not an abstract thinker. Like the way that I work, I like bullet points. I like, and so being able to look at the binder and have my chapters and my scenes, and I actually name my scenes so that at a glance I can see what's happening in each one. And that, yeah. And being able to just grab a scene and like you said, I can just like move it. I love that.
Yep.
Wait, writing requires thought?
What?
What? This is news. I've been doing this wrong. I thought it required a lot of procrastination.
Procrastination.
Yes, that.
So, how do you handle the editing process? I mean, do you shop it out or ship it out to somebody else? Do you do your own self-editing? Do you just rely on beta readers, or how do you do it?
I feel like this is a
trick question. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Secrets.
Yeah, I do feel like it's a risky question. It depends. I have a multi POV sort of epic fantasy series with dinosaurs that I've been working on for a couple years, and that I really think that I will probably send and have completely edited by an editor, because there's just so much going on there. It's been hard to make sure that I'm connecting all the characters, and it's a trilogy, so there's just a lot to set up even in that first book, and that's why that's not published yet. It's still being worked on, but
right.
Fantasy with dinosaurs, you say? Do you need a beta
reader? With this one, I'm really fortunate. I have a couple of published authors that have written and published several books that I kind of consider mentors. When I really started getting into publishing and writing books a couple years ago, they kind of, as I was transitioning, like I'd been writing screenplays and I was like, I want to get back into books, but I didn't even really know anything about the business. I was like, I know a lot about movies. I don't really know. So I had to learn all the little acronyms that writers use on Twitter. And so I was that person that was like, what is that? What is this CP? I don't, so I was kind of getting into that. I was really fortunate to have some close friends that had kind of already navigated that. One of them's traditionally published, the other two are indie. And they were really able to just answer all of my dumb questions. Like I come to them and be like, now what? Like I wrote my book, like how, like your questions y'all are asking me, like how do you handle editing? I didn't know. I was like, I don't know how to get it. I've written a lot of things, but there was a hurdle of getting from that. Like I have a draft, or maybe I've even revised my drafts, but how do I get it to a completed thing that I can hand to people? So they betaed for me on this book, and that was awesome. And then it kind of went through I kind of had a couple rounds of betas. So I sent it to sort of the friends that I consider mentors first, and they gave me kind of their feedback, and I made some revisions, and then I got some more like micro feedback when it went to like my second set of people. So I pretty much depending on how you view that, I mean, I pretty much self-edited this book. And like I said, I feel like that's a risky, I know some people are kind of leery of that. They're like, oh no, like it's self-edited and it's self-published. Like, I'm sure it's going to be great. Like, so I don't normally tell people that, but now everyone, it's out there. It's on the internet.
We need to have a discussion with that little yellow icon up there. I feel we should have done this before the show.
I feel like there's no, I plead the fifth. Like, how do you edit your books? I plead the fifth.
There you go.
I can neither confirm nor deny that this book was self-edited.
Well, there's nothing wrong with self-editing, and I mean, I'm going through round 2 on one of my books right now, but it will go to my editor first because I do publish through a small house. So,
I think people have a mindset that like if you're self-editing, that you've got the kid gloves on with yourself, and that you're not really editing yourself. That you're just kind of like, I don't know what people think. You're just like reading your own book and telling your,
One example that everybody brings up too.
Yeah, you can be just as hard on yourself as you are on somebody else. You just have to have a different mindset about it. That's my feeling on it.
you kind of have to learn how to read things with which I feel like is one of the things that like learning story paradigm is what has helped me do that, because even though I can never be fully, obviously I can never be fully objective of my own work, like having that framework, it helps me look at it and go like, you know, like I can feel, like I just get a feeling a lot of times, even reading my own, I'm like, the pacing is wrong or the tone is not working, like, you know. And so I think you can kind of cultivate those things and gain more objectivity over time.
I found that I mean, quite honestly, K.M. Weiland has beta read the first 4 books in my series, and working with her particularly has really opened my eyes to, you know, these are my shortcomings. This is where I usually struggle. And that has helped me in this next book to be able to say, okay, this is where I need to go. So
And right about now, everybody's getting an email message. Quit mispronouncing my name.
I see it in my head one way, and I know she says it a different way.
So how does she say it? Because I've never.
It's Cam Weiland.
Okay. Okay, I got it. That's how I've been saying it.
Have you listened to her podcast?
Yes.
Okay.
Now that you mentioned it, I have. So I have heard her say it.
Yeah, and she has guested on our show too. So.
Yep.
Yeah. Episode.
In the
5 and I think episode 5 and 6. So
early-ish.
Yeah, it's very early. So I'm gonna try to get her to come back when she releases Wayfarer. So
you know, another before we move off of self-editing too, you know, just kind of what you were just saying about like she's read your books and you learned over time, like I like you've learned to be honest with yourself about what your weaknesses are, and that to me is the thing. I mean, I'm in a lot of like author groups like on Facebook and that kind of thing, and people really struggling through the beta process, which I realize is just a few years ago I didn't have anybody. I was really not plugged in with the writing community. I had just like friends who are not writers, and that's just terrible to be like, here, read my whole manuscript. You know, they're so overwhelming. They're like, I don't know what to tell you. So I've been really fortunate to like get plugged in with Realm Makers and some of these other like communities where I now have people that that's kind of just for anybody who's listening, who's like thinking about self-editing. I mean, that's how betas fit in, is like I sent it to these 3 people that I trusted, and like there were certain things that pretty much all 3 of them said. You know what I mean? They were like, you need to address this particular thing. And like if 3 people come back, and it's particularly, I know these are 3 people that understand story and I like they jive with how I like to tell stories. Okay, that's something that I need to change. So you kind of learn to filter the feedback, and certainly if you're getting it a lot, that's probably something to at least take a look at.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you know, even if you only have one beta reader and whatever they say kind of hits you right here in the middle of your chest, I mean, if you have that awareness as an artist and with your conscience, you need to listen to that too, even if it's just one person that says it. So, yep.
All right, so we're going to let Aaron take the next question.
Because I have no idea where we are anymore. 11?
7.
7, okay.
And then we're jumping to 11.
There's so many things messed up right now.
Yeah, we're looking at the time going,
Anyway, we're at the 7 then. So how do you deal with writer's block, or do you even get it?
Do you ever have anyone on the show that says they don't get writer's block?
Actually, yes.
Yeah, we actually do.
Well, I need to go back and listen to those.
Usually, though, those are the people who have been doing this for decades.
Right.
And they've learned how to deal with that, and we've actually gained some valuable tips from that, too.
Well, and that was going to kind of be my answer is, like, yes, definitely, but I don't see it as, like, writer's block the way I hear people talk about writer's block, because I don't think that it's a thing. I think that, like, what we call writer's block is just it's just you not wanting to write or not being able to write because you have some root issue. And a lot of times that's just, like, motivation, honestly. I think, like, maybe 9 times out of 10 when somebody has writer's block, and I'm lumping myself in with that, like a lot of times it's I don't feel like writing today. And that is something that, like, over the last couple of years I have really developed more of a routine of just writing, and you do kind of get to a place where it's like working out. I mean, you get to a place where like that becomes natural. It's not as hard to get started every day because you've developed that muscle. A lot of times for me though, I get like writer's block because I have made a mistake the previous day. And maybe I didn't realize it until I got there. I sat down the next day, but I'll find like, I can't move forward. And sometimes it's easy to focus on, well, where am I going? Sometimes in order to fix that, like you need to actually look back where you were. And like, honestly, I found sometimes it's a line. Maybe I wrote like a line of dialogue or something that, I literally just had this the other day where I was like, this character is too resentful in this previous dialogue that I wrote before. And it is causing everyone to be angry at each other in this next scene, and they can't be angry at each other. Like they have to go do this other thing. And I had to go back and go, what thoughts is he having to himself that are like making the tone of this just like not right? So I took those out and it fixed it. So a lot of times if I sit down, I'm like, I feel like I can't move forward. I'm like, let me look back and make sure I didn't paint myself into a corner.
Right. And I think that's helpful. So, okay, so shifting gears a little bit, everybody's favorite question in the world. What do your marketing practices look like?
So I actually love, like, I know you're being sarcastic. I actually love marketing.
You're like the second person we've got with that answer.
Who is the other one?
John Delarose, and there was one other person too, wasn't there?
Ben Wolf had the guy in his basement.
Yes, Ben Wolf. Yep, the basement guy.
And I think we had a couple people that's like their natural territory anyway. So
yeah.
So I think there's been a couple people we've had on that's just their job.
I don't love it more than writing. And when it starts to cut into writing time, I start to be like, okay, I'm like tired. But I'm an extroverted person. I'm not one of those really shy writers that doesn't want you to like make eye contact with them. That's not who I am. And that's, I really identify like when
that's another potential person I can literally hide behind at Realmakers.
I love going to conferences and meeting new people. I love that. I when you read a book, I actually identify a lot with Huxley. Like that's his personality, is that he's the salesman, and definitely if you ask me like which, I'm not as sneaky as he is, but but definitely that like being that mindset is more who I am. But yeah, I actually kind of like it.
Nothing wrong with that. So
what do you do? What are some tips that you can give us to sell more books?
Are we trying to sell books? No, I'm still figuring it out.
Darn it.
Yeah, I'm still figuring it out. I think the thing about sales is that it is a numbers game, and every little thing that I think a lot of things that we do as writers, we're like, I'm going to do this one thing and I'm going to sell a lot of books. And that's just not the way it works. Like all brands now are figuring out that it's very relationship driven. You cannot just throw an ad at somebody and expect them to buy something. And that's fair. Cause like which one of us wants to like buy something just cause somebody's like telling us to buy it? Nobody likes that. So I think you have to see everything that you do. I mean, I know this is like, people hate buzzwords and it's a buzzword, but you have to see everything that you do as a platform. And you really have to see it as, I'm not just trying to sell someone a book. I'm really actually growing a brand. I'm growing a platform. And you have to be authentic. Like you can't just, you're like, I'm growing my platform, like 5 minutes. Really. So I really like the funnel analogy. If you've seen the funnel, that you start wide and you kind of like generate a lot of leads, and then eventually some of those people are going to funnel down and become actual customers. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I approach things. Is a lot of things like I'm very active on Twitter. Well, I've heard from a lot of people, like when I got into Twitter, they're like, Twitter's terrible. You'll never sell any books. That's not been totally true. Now, have I sold like a gazillion books on Twitter? No, because like most people on Twitter will never buy my book, but I have made a lot of relationships there from doing hashtag games and things like that, where I now have those people in my circle. And some of them, the handful of them that really were like, I will run out and buy a book, they became ambassadors. Like they're actually fans because they loved the book. And so that's worth it because that multiplies. So,
yeah. Cool.
I mean, this maybe isn't is a slight rabbit trail. How does everybody feel about? Everybody has like the Facebook groups for authors' name super fans or something like that. How's everybody's experiences with those? And do you have your own Facebook?
That's
group
a great question.
People can stalk you on.
So I have mixed feelings about them. I do have one. In fact, everyone listening is invited to join. What a great segue. Thank you, Aaron. No, I have one, and I'll tell you why I have one. What was really important for me when I started this series is I wanted to build a fandom. I was like, this to me is a world that can go on. I can keep writing books in this world for a while. It's got great characters, and I really, to me, that's the kind of thing I always wanted to make. I didn't want to just write books. I was like, I want to create a fandom where people can feel invited to step into that world. And that's what I want people to feel, that almost a little bit of ownership over the characters and world that you do when you're a fan of something. And so I've really been looking at like what, I actually went to a writing conference recently and I saw that someone was doing a session on how to build fandom, and I freaked out because that's the first time I've heard anybody talk about that. But I feel like one of the things, if you're trying to build fans with a large IP like Marvel or something, they find each other like on Tumblr or on Twitter or whatever. When you have an indie book that doesn't have as broad distribution, you maybe have fans, but they're isolated. So in my mind, I was like, I really want these fans to be able to feel like they're part of a community. I don't want them to feel like, well, I read this book and it was great, but like nobody else knows about it. I wanted a place where, so I thought, well, they're not going to find each other, create a place for them. So I do have a reader group. It's really for that, so that fans can find other fans. The problem that I see with them, because you asked how I feel about them, I do kind of feel like they are rapidly getting glutted, because just within the last few months, like everybody has started one, and I think we're going to get saturated.
Yeah,
so,
the algorithms changed and pages aren't being seen, and so everybody's moving over to groups. And I mean, it's been talked about on a lot of other podcasts that, go to groups because you can get the visibility that you need to get out there. But you, just like you said, it's going to turn into just like a page where.
Yeah, because I mean, I've been thinking about starting one of mine for my own group, because you said the whole stuff about fandom, and that really struck with me, because that's why I wanted to do some of my stuff too. And then the problem with I see with those is all of them, like you said, like, oh wow, like 12 of my favorite authors have these, and I can't keep up with them, even though I really want to.
Exactly. It's just too hard to pop between.
Yeah, the nice thing about them is that people outside of yourself can start conversations, and that's what I like in opposition to the page where it's all you driven. But you have to develop that community to be engaged, and I'm doing the same thing. I've got one going right now, and it's all me right now still. And I wish it wasn't, but it is, and that's the way it is. So
and I like I said, I'd like to keep up with that too, but it's like, there's your group, and there's this author's group, and I want to be involved with all of them as a reader. It's like,
you kind of have to pick and choose.
And you're trying to.
And as authors, maybe it's us that has the problem. Maybe readers don't have that much of a problem keeping up with multiple authors.
That's possible.
But I mean, we're busy, connecting with other writers. We're busy writing books. We're busy marketing. Our life is a lot different than our readers.
That's a good point.
So
if anybody listening to this as a reader has a comment, feel free to chime in the comments. They're right down there.
Yeah. And your group is Story Worlds of Mollie E. Reeder?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
The magic of internet stalking.
Yeah. I'm putting a link in our show notes. So
awesome.
We're not stalking you, Mollie. By the way, you're out of milk.
One day you're going to pull that gag, Josh, and somebody's going to say, I'm lactose intolerant and I don't drink milk.
There's the group. All right,
well, then he would be right. They are out of milk.
All right. What fandom or fandoms have influenced your writing the most?
I feel like it's different all the time because I feel like what I'm a fan of changes a lot. I don't know what that says, but I go on kicks where I'm like really like into something and it like permeates, you know. But I would say that one for me a lot is like I love musicals and that's like maybe not the answer you were expecting, but I love musicals. And so actually like when I write and I listen to a lot of musicals. I know some people can only do instrumental. I actually listen to a lot of musicals. And so like for this one, like Finding Neverland, I love the music from Finding Neverland. And because that had so many themes that are like resonant to this story. And like I said, Carthage is kind of based a little bit off J.M. Barrie's life. I listen to that a lot. And so that's maybe, yeah, Broadway. I don't know.
Hey, you know, there's nothing wrong with Broadway. So
it's okay. I mean, there's a scene in the book that I'm working on, or will be working on, that was inspired by a scene from Newsies. So
yeah, Newsies is one of my favorites. I love Newsies.
Yes.
I in general, I guess I'm the opposing voice here. In general, I have an opinion about musicals. There are, however, a few of them that I like. Newsies was one of them. The Sound of Music I love, and maybe one or two other musicals that I can tolerate. I don't know.
Yeah, I've frequently throw musical stuff into my rotation. The Greatest Showman got added in recently. Hamilton, mostly because I really like the Weird Al take on it. And then occasionally I'll throw ragtime in. So. So
I wrote an entire screenplay listening to Les Mis one time, which was really fun. Like during actual battles.
Nice. So yeah, there was a time when that was like all I listened to was Broadway musicals from the 50s and 60s, but and sometimes the 40s if I could get it, but yeah, so
I listen to a lot of Disney music too. Like I'm like one of those adults that like even Disney TV shows. I'm like some random like Disney show put out it. I'm all over that, and I'm no shame. I will admit that while the little yellow button is on.
You finally figured out what it means.
Of course. Now I'm thinking of that scene from Zootopia, where the chief is talking to Officer Cops. This is not some cutesy little children's movie. So let it go.
Let it go.
That was one of the best in jokes
That's
ever.
That was a pretty good one.
Yes.
Aaron, I think it's your question.
Oh, I got stuck with this one.
Yeah, nobody likes this question.
Nobody can answer this one. What's your favorite book?
Okay, see, I did my homework for this because I was like, they are not going to drop this question on me. I'm going to have an answer prepared because that is a hard question.
One. Everybody else is like, it's picking a favorite child. I can't answer it.
Yeah. So I'm going to be cagey, though, and I'm going to say that, like I just said, I feel like picking something, like an all-time favorite book, like, they're all so different. But I'm going to tell you something I really enjoyed that is recently, like, one of my favorite things that I've read recently. I have a friend, Sarah Elizabeth Sawyer, who does not write specs. This is not going to be a spec book. But she's Native American, and she writes historical fiction.
Ooh.
And is like, speaking of, we were talking about research earlier, like she is the opposite of me because she's very, very attentive to, and I mean, she'll tell me about some of the stuff that she does. She'll be like, I went to like the National Archives and I took out these letters that this guy wrote and I like proved that he was in this city in July, which means the timeline works out. I'm like Nancy Drew of history. That part sounds fun. What doesn't sound fun to me is like she just spent a whole year in research for this book that she's working on now. And it's just really important because a lot of these people have living descendants. It's really important to get the stories right and to really preserve the culture and the history. But she has a series called the Choctaw Tribune, and it is set in Indian territory. Oh, I don't want to say what year it is. Oh, it's right here. I can tell you what year it is. Yeah, 1893, because it's the World's Fair. So
Oh, cool.
it's about a family, and they are half Choctaw, half white, and they run a newspaper in a little fictional town in Oklahoma. And the main character is a teenage girl, and she's kind of coming of age as a female reporter right here at the turn of the century in Indian Territory. And her and her brother are kind of getting caught up in a lot of the just the social and the civil and the political stuff that was going on at the time. Really, really cool. They kind of cross over. It's mostly fictional characters, but they cross over with some real people. The first book is called The Executions. The second book is called Traders. And in Traders, they go to the World's Fair in Chicago, and I loved this book. It was great. It has a great thread of mystery where there's a character, actually a POV character in it that you don't know if he's a good guy or a bad guy. Ooh. And she really leads you through the whole thing. You're not sure how he's going to turn out, and I loved this book. It was great. So if you like history, if you like westerns, it's got kind of a western feel, or if you like strong female protagonists, kind of coming of age stories, that's a really, really good series.
Okay, I read that. I really do like historical fiction, especially if it's well researched like that. And it's my favorite way to learn history.
They're great because they're entertaining. Like, they're accurate, but they're really entertaining.
Now, the second one is Traders, Traitors.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and who's the author again?
That's Sarah, Sarah, Elizabeth with an S, and then Sawyer, Sawyer.
Okay, wanted to make sure we got it typed into our show notes.
Yes.
Yep, those will go in the show notes.
They're in the show notes now. I'm typing them up as we do this show today because
we're actually
she's on top of things.
I'm trying
to.
I'm trying.
Is that Sarah with an H or without an H?
With an H.
Okay.
So what's something that has surprised you the most about being an author?
What has surprised me about being an author? It's a really hard question.
Sometimes, for some people, it is.
I'll tell you. I will tell you something, because there is something that just surprised me recently. Having just published a book for the first time, and I know that everyone has like very different perspectives on reviews. I know some people don't look at them all at all. I have recently read several positive reviews, and I think it's interesting that I think that positive reviews can affect you as much as negative reviews can. Yes. And I recently heard an interview with Hugh Jackman where they were asking him, they were like, how do you deal with critics and that kind of thing? And he said, well, I don't read any reviews. And they said, well, what about good ones? He said, I don't read good ones. And he said, because when I used to be on stage, he was like, they'd come and they'd review the show. And he was like, I'd read the review the next day and they'd be like, this thing that he did in the second act was like the most amazing thing. And he'd be like, how did I do it last night? And he was like, I would get so in my head about like recreating whatever it was that somebody liked the night before that I wasn't able to just get up and do my work.
Right.
And so I think just the overall sort of like emotional, like I had a really good launch and it was great and it was actually a lot of fun. I think just the overall sort of emotional, like the other side of releasing a book has just been really surprising, what that feels like, and just the kind of surprising things that you have to deal with, like mentally and I'm just like making it sound terrible. It's like,
no, I totally
people
understand.
at home trying to finish their books are like, but yeah, it's just been like, I don't even want to say that it's been bad because it's been really good, but it's just been different. Like, I don't know, it's just been an interesting like learning curve through now I'm a published author and what do you like, it just feels different. I don't know. There are no words.
Hey, that works.
Yeah. So you kind of already answered this with the previous question, but give us your best sage advice now that you're a published author, those who are aspiring authors.
So this is going to be another one that might sound negative, but it's not negative. Okay. My new thing that whenever I'm asked, like, what is your advice for authors? Especially like people just getting into, and this really goes anything creative. Like, you're not always going to like it. Okay. Like, just because you love it, you're not always going to like it. And when we made the movie, we went through like a full year of editing it, and we had special effects and a lot of things that just took a long time, and it was at certain junctures miserable. I mean, really, it was very hard. It was like sweating blood. And I read an article, I think an interview with, I think it was Andrew Stanton from Pixar. It's like, Nemo and this. And he made a comment. He said, on every single project I've ever worked on, there was a point at which I hated it. And I read that and I was like, it was such a relief to hear like this guy like has an Oscar, you know, like, oh, I'm like I'm normal. Like it is hard. And I think having kind of like walked through that and like, it's totally worth it. If you love it, it's totally worth it. But I think that especially like novice creatives need to hear that they're not always going to like it, because when you get into it and it's hard and it's not fun, your response is to think like, maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, or like, this is just not what I'm supposed to do. And I don't think it's true. I think if you love it, just persevere through that and it'll be worth it on the other side, but it's not you. Like it is work. It's work that you love, but it is work. And there are going to be days when you're like, I don't want to go to work, but yeah you gotta keep going.
That's for sure.
Yeah, Aaron, you gotta keep going.
Wait, you actually have to work?
Darn it.
Yeah, doing that work is sometimes the hardest part, is just getting your butt in the chair.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean, it's great to talk about writing.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, there's days when that's all I really want to do is just talk about writing, and then I don't get anything written, I don't get anything edited, I don't spend any time on marketing.
It reminds me of that scene, Spec Fic reference. The scene in Back to the Future Part 2 where a young Elijah Wood asks Marty McFly for the help with the shooting game. You mean you have to use your hands?
I always
up and walks away.
That's Elijah Wood. I always forget that he's in that.
Yeah.
Huh. Cool.
Liberty still hasn't seen them.
No, I have not. I'll check. Since I'm in the line.
There's going to be a day where you're just going to be sitting at home, la 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 la, doing yard work or something, and Josh and I will jump out of the bushes and duct tape you to a chair and make you into it.
Sounds pleasant.
Yeah.
I'll look and see if they have it at my library while I'm here today and make a point about it. Okay, I'm logging into the library thing, the library catalog right now.
You do that while I ask the next question.
Yeah, you do that.
So, Mollie, what would you like to accomplish next, more than just a book, or a long-term personal goal where your career is concerned?
I suddenly had the instinct to say something really snarky, but I didn't have it. I didn't have one. I just really wanted to be. So I want to make more. I want to make more movies, and I think I would really like to get to a place just as a filmmaker where I could make spec movies, because they're really hard and really expensive to make. And so the one that we made was not simple by any means. It had children and dogs, but I would really
work with children or animals.
Yeah, we were like, oh, you know what we should do? We should have singing, we should have kids, we should have dogs, and we should have pyrotechnics.
Yeah, what can go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, really. But I'd like to get to a point where I could make my own spec stories into movies. That's just like as a long-term thing. I think that would be really fun.
That would be really neat. Yeah.
Yeah, that's expensive, but.
Yeah, how much does a flying train cost anyway?
Oh, I'm sure Lucasfilm could figure that one out for you.
Yeah, they just do it in CG these days.
It's not how much. I was going to say it's not how much the train costs. It's about how much the animators cost, having to feed them.
Yeah,
the months and months that they're working on it.
Cranky animators.
Yep.
Yeah, why do they have to get paid? I don't know.
So, real quick before we ask the final question, you've talked about being a movie producer. What's the name of your studio, and where can people find out about your movie work?
Yeah, so
that's kind of different. We haven't had anybody involved with movies on before.
It's a first. So the movie is called Aria Appleton.
Okay.
I'm typing that, so I need to spell that for you. And you can find it on IMDb. We honestly don't have a huge, speaking of platform, we don't have a huge platform yet. We were so focused kind of on getting the movie done, and we've been kind of working out what our distribution strategy is. So I believe this year we're going to actually start building like more of a social media presence for the movie and for the studio. The studio, we're under the name Grafted Studios, but you won't really find it, which sounds so sketchy. You won't really, like, don't Google it. You won't find it. But legally we worked under that name, but like, yeah, we don't really have a huge presence. This was our first movie, so we don't have a huge online presence yet.
Right.
You can follow what
I can just imagine you guys selling this movie out of a back of truck.
Well, I have me and one of my co-producers. We are the like class clowns of the group, and we are constantly, like, I'm sure everybody else is sick of this joke, but we're constantly joking that we are going to bootleg it for profit, you know, and that well, technically Jason and I have already sold the movie, you know, in 15 foreign territories, so
Nice.
but you can follow. It does have a Facebook page, Aria Appleton. You can look it up on Facebook, and that's kind of where, if we do have announcements about kind of how things are developing, that's where you'll see it. But
Okay.
yeah, it's a faith-based kind of middle grade musical comedy.
Yeah, that's what it looks like for the movie poster. I just pulled it up on IMDb, so looks cool. So, okay, final question. Kind of relates to the previous one. Where can our listeners go to find out more about you and your writing?
So there is a. Let me think about where I want to send people for this. The best place they can go is signing up for my newsletter.
Okay.
And you do get a free novelette if you sign up for the newsletter. It is set in the same universe as the Electrical Menagerie with the same characters. It's called Arbrook Huxley and the Star-Crossed Lovers. And it involves a love triangle and a disapproving aunt and a magician's hat. That's all I'll say. It's a fun.
Where can we go to sign up for this newsletter?
So probably the best place. Pretty much any website I own. The best place, there's a landing page. There's a short link landing page that is bit.ly / celestial story. And let me make sure, because I know that capitalization matters. It's all lowercase.
I got it.
Yeah, so that's the landing page. If you go there, you can sign up. That's kind of where I'm doing most of my communicating right now. You can also, and I do a lot of.
You do have a link on your Facebook page.
Say again? Oh, a link, yeah.
You do have a link on your Facebook page.
Oh, see, you were using your.
It's hiding under the About section in Facebook, if you're wondering.
I like never look at the pages, so. I'm also on Twitter. I'm at Ryteratops. So if people want to follow me on there, that's a good
Which is just such a clever name.
I have for anyone, because it's a pun. It's like these are my business cards that go out. So
sweet.
My little Ryteratops mascot.
That horn is so cute.
And so that's a pun that I've wanted to use like for no less than 8 years. I thought of that so many years ago, and I was like, I just love that pun. And recently,
that is so cool.
I'm gonna go with it.
All right.
Well, thanks so much for hanging out with us today, Mollie. It's been a blast.
Super fun. I loved it. It was awesome. I really appreciate it.
Right in with our quirky personalities.
Yes.
Quirky, that's what we're calling it now.
The audience doesn't know that you guys were like apologizing. You were like trying to brace me. You're like, I hope it's going to be really overwhelming. I was like, you don't know what kind of family I grew up in. Like, I'll be okay.
Well, we have some of our more introverted guests who get on the show, and they're kind of like,
Yeah.
like
You just need to hear.
Well, we've been doing this show for 2.5 years now, and so Josh and Aaron and I are kind of like siblings. So,
I apologize in advance to anyone else.
Well, I was very happy to come and be the weird cousin and drop in.
Perfect.
well, let us know when the next book comes out, and we would love to have you back on.
Definitely.
Awesome. I would love it.
So, okay, guys. Well, have a great day, everybody. And we're going to sign off now. So,
Yeah.
Bye.
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 Hasta la vista.